Tennessee 3, Aging Transgender Concerns, and Jordan Peterson. This ain't your mama's podcast. It's the Chico DeManuel Show. Let's get it. Dating advice for me is tantamount to bitter medicine that might not even work. Despite this, I try to employ a balance of fairness and sacrifice when giving advice about how people should conduct their relationships, and I realize oftentimes it's a lot easier said than done. I find Reddit to be a juicy source for people with inquiries. So when I saw a thread about a woman who was unsure about whether she should get a divorce and pursue her longtime love affair or stick to the commitment she made to her husband in an attempt to work through this hangup, I unilaterally assigned myself the duty of attempting to return this woman to sanity. I'm anxiously trying not to reveal my stance before I read the post, but if you've ever listened to any of my content, you could probably assume how I feel about this just based off that short description. But let's read the post so we can fully absorb the gravity of this woman's dilemma. She says, I'm married to a man who seems to love me. We've had our ups and downs and been through a lot, but that's not the main issue. I am and have been in love with somebody else for almost 2 decades now. I've tried to get over this man. I dated, I got married, I had a child. I figured my feelings would fade for this man, who I never dated, by the way, but they haven't. Excuse me. I am friends with this man and have been for quite some time. We used to be closer when I lived in the same town, but since I moved far away, we still chat, and I don't think he knows how I feel. He is married, seems happy, and nothing has ever happened between us. He is almost 40 years older than me, so he likely doesn't think of me in a romantic way and wouldn't even if he wasn't married. He also likely doesn't think someone my age would have such an interest in him, which is probably why he is comfortable with the friendship to begin with. If I if he does suspect that I like him romantically, he has never brought it up, nor has he ever tried to gain anything from me due to my feelings. What should I do? Should I stay with my husband when I love this other man that I know I won't ever be with? It doesn't seem fair to my husband to stay with him while I wish for someone else to be with. I've been married to my husband for 7 years, and I don't think my feelings for this other man are going to change. TLDR, I want to get divorced because I'm in love with someone else. The very first line of this woman's post is, I'm married to a man who seems to love me. Now, what the hell exactly is that supposed to mean? Wouldn't it be safe to presume that to some degree your husband, who has gone through ups and downs with you, actually loves you? From the first sentence, I am puzzled because the tone of that sentence makes it hard for me to conclude that she isn't the problem here. It's evasive language, and it's almost certainly concealing some shitty behavior on her part. She claims she's been in love with another man she's known for almost 20 years, and all of her attempts to free herself of his seductive grasp have fallen short. She claims she got married and bore children on the presumption that her feelings would automatically fade for this other man. She also claims she hasn't dated or slept with this guy. In the first paragraph alone, based off her testimony, My gut tells me that this woman is emotionally irresponsible and unloyal to her husband, and thought he was some kind of prescription designed to propel her away from a love interest who she hasn't even dated. It's audacious at the minimum, and if I were to hear my wife describe me as some kind of covert therapeutic vessel for her to resolve her shallow desires for a male friend, I would be repulsed and highly disappointed. She goes on to lightly describe the nature of her connection to this man and reveals she moved far away from this town, but still speaks to him, and she's unsure if he's aware about her feelings for him. To which I respond, he may have alarming suspicions and theories which he doesn't have stone cold evidence to prove. But any man capable of maintaining a friendship with a woman for 20 years is likely to be adept at noticing signs of attraction, regardless whether the feelings are pursued or discarded. I think she's trying to paint a picture as if she's really in some kind of stressful situation. And if she does happen to be, it's one of her doing entirely. Furthermore, the man is 40 years older than her. So I'm going to assume that this man is in his 60s. She suggests he likely doesn't look at her romantically, regardless of his own marriage, which piqued my curiosity as to why she thinks that. Also, for her to suggest that her youth compared to his is a reason why he isn't interested and willingly dangles in the friend zone, if that exists for married women, that is this is so many questions to her strange narratives. And if these thoughts are pervasive enough to jeopardize your marriage, it's a troubling situation for your husband. There is no mention in the article of her discussing this with him, meaning he's likely none the wiser of the emotional fragility that his wife is going through. And this final paragraph actually pisses me off a tad. It really annoys me when people consult you for advice but really want you to tell them what they already know or to go along with their horse shit. Should you stay with your husband when you love another man you know you'll never attain? Hell yeah. Her assertion regarding how unfair it is for her husband to be stuck with a child minded hypergamous candidate who wants to casually discard her future for a man who's potentially unsure of her feelings is goddamn accurate. As a husband, picture this conversation. After 7 years of marriage, I'm leaving you to court an almost elderly man who I've known for 20 years and might not even be interested in romantically. Well, he might not be interested in me romantically. Okay, bye. How would you feel if your wife dropped a bomb like that on you in 7 years into your marriage with the lousiest reasoning imaginable and posted it all over Reddit before she even spoke to you about it? I don't know about you, but it would make me fall even deeper in love with her, is what a punk ass simp would say. She goes on to conclude that she doesn't think her feelings are going to change, and I would agree. But it's solely because you don't want them to change. Your attitude is the epitome of ungratefulness and deceit, and you rather dabble with the thrill and uncertainty of loose possibilities at the expense of the man you devoted your life to, who turns out was likely just a convenient emotional tampon whom you lack the common decency to flush down a toilet once it's no longer useful. This woman's attitude and other women who share are absolutely frightening to men looking to build families and futures. The thought of a bond considered holy and sanctimonious and in alignment with the Christian God being so easily frayed over her inability to reconcile her restless emotions with her duty as a wife. She mentions not irreconcilable differences, adultery, domestic abuse. There's some dude in his 60s who she's friends with and is secretly in love with. Bitch, this ain't high school. The stakes are high and you're playing for keeps. It's actually really, really sad. And I can't imagine how her husband will adapt to this startling reality when he inevitably discovers that he married a paper plate. In summary, my advice to this emotional harlot would be to firstly come clean to your husband about this goofy ass secret mental affair. Completely clean. This man committed his life and love to you, as did you to him. The minimal display of decency you could display, if you have any at all, is to lay it on the table and give him an opportunity to decide for himself whether he wants to willingly discard his efforts and time or continue pumping resources into a foolish and immature woman. How can you actually be on the internet saying you want a divorce to be with some distant silver fox who has unconfirmed potential romantic interest with you? Who taught you how to manage your feelings? Don't answer that. It's evident that you're totally unfamiliar with things like decency, respect, dignity, and loyalty. I think you should be deeply ashamed of yourself. I would suggest ways to try to implement some damage control, but I'm not remotely convinced based on this pathetic ass Reddit post that you're even capable of feeling shame or guilt after dropping a bomb like this one way or another. You have irrevocably failed to uphold your end of the bargain for some childish soap opera fantasy. Therefore, you are not ready or deserving of a marriage or the good man you are conspiring to betray on a public goddamn forum. If I was you, I would leave this marriage because I lack the emotional development and maturity necessary for a marriage to thrive. And this man should have ample time to plan and prepare for his world to be flipped upside down because he was duped by a woman who's addicted to the thrill of momentary pleasures and mental candy at the expense of lifelong pleasures and mental fortitude. I find your antics despicable. I don't know who you are, but if I did, I would publicly and privately shame you and your attitude of thinking that people are simply pawns in the games of how much grip you have over your own emotions and reasoning. Set this man free and take your goofy ass back to the goddamn streets where you belong and consider this a lesson about when the fuck it's time to stop being a kid and grow up. Women like you will always be problematic because you think it's all a big damn game until it isn't. Now get the hell off my podcast, you hypergamic dangler. If you aren't familiar with the Tennessee Three, good. Unfortunately, if you don't know, you're about to. The Tennessee Three consists of Tennessee House Democrats who Republicans attempted to remove after a disruptive gun control protest regarding a school shooting which had occurred in Nashville, Tennessee earlier this year. Fake Martin Luther King Jr. impersonator and Holy Ghost spokesperson Justin Peterson brought a bullhorn into the meeting and continued on with an ostentatious rant which halted the movement of the session and led him and one other member being expelled from the Tennessee House. They were later reinstated after winning their respective elections by a massive landslide. In response to this behavior, the Tennessee House has implemented new disciplinary rules that will deny members from speaking if they become a disruption, change the topic of discussion, or impugn the reputation of another member. To me, this seemed like a natural consequence to supply a reasonable punishment for behavior designed to cause havoc and make grandiose displays and prevent it from happening in the future. As is typical with these Afrocentric, radically pro-black people, they often begin to be racist and claim to free speech. Go figure. It's always the same song and dance with these race hustlers and their circular narratives. I believe if any other member in that house, regardless of an identifying metric, were to behave the way that they did, it would have resulted in a very similar outcome. Republicans insist that these new rules are necessary to ensure the smooth function of the body, which seems to me like a natural response to rabble-rousing troublemakers. Had they not done that shit, business would have carried on as normal, and this wouldn't even be a big deal. The article from The Hill gives a bit more detail into the situation. It reads, members of the Tennessee Three, the group of Tennessee House Democrats who Republicans attempted to remove over a gun control protest earlier this year, railed against new House rules that limit what members can say on the House floor. There was an article written called, "Is Tennessee a Democracy?" And I believe today we are getting a very clear answer that it is not. Representative Justin Peterson said on the House floor Monday. The rules that are being put forward now are to limit freedom of speech. The new disciplinary rules allow the House to block members from speaking if they cause disruption, speak off the topic of debate, or impugn the reputation of another member. The rules also ban members of the public from carrying signs into the chamber galleries. In late March, Pearson, alongside Representatives Justin Jones and Gloria Johnson, interrupted House proceedings to protest for gun control after a mass shooting at a Nashville school. And that's the one where that trans person ran up into the she ran up into like a Christian school or a Catholic school and killed two children and a staff member, if I'm not mistaken. Republicans succeeded in expelling Pearson and Jones, who are black, which doesn't matter, from the body, while Johnson, who was white, was allowed to stay in this legislature. Both Pearson and Jones were reelected earlier this month and has rejoined the legislature representing Memphis and Nashville, respectively. The Tennessee legislature began a special session to consider public safety and mental health legislation Monday in direct response to the March mass shooting. Democrats hope that the session will be used to again consider gun control legislation. The House disciplinary change was the first move of the session, leading some to believe that it was targeted at creating more serious consequences if the Tennessee Three or others chose to protest again. Republicans argued the new rules are necessary for the body to work over the coming days. Any violation of the new policies would silence the member for 3 days, with the special session expected to last until Friday. What is considered a disruption is up to House Speaker Cameron Sexton, who Jones has accused of discriminating against black members of the chamber. Jones questioned the new policy on the floor Monday, noting it has no way to hold Sexton accountable if he applies the rules incorrectly. Where in these rules can you hold the speaker accountable for abusing constitutional rights and misapplying the rules based upon a member's skin color, as opposed to treating every member of this body as an equal member? Republicans in the chamber derided Jones, but he doubled down, saying, "You can boo, but the truth will be told today." Sexton then cut off Jones's microphone while he continued to attempt to speak. In a session Tuesday, members of the public wrote flashing messages on phone screens or clothing to skirt the rules against carrying signs. The Tennessean reported, no state or House or Senate committees have yet considered gun control legislation during the session. Now, for me, the chief irritant about the way these Democrats spin and equivocate language to control the frame of so many situations is that it is very, very effective. These people operate on a wavelength of arbitrary whims, buzzwords, victim mentalities, and the ever present crisis of systemic racism, which always seems to become pervasively intolerable when white people say or do something certain black people don't like. Justin Pearson is a fucking joke. His contemporary stylings crediting the great Martin Luther King Jr. is all a part of the theatrical narrative to pretend that his interests align with the left-leaning public and gun regulations reform. If this were true, why does he undermine his entire stance by causing an unignorable interruption during House meetings? Even if it is in the name of gun control or whatever other virtue they're trying to signal. Dude literally brought a bullhorn into the meeting to amplify his voice and was still silenced. This is not racism. This is unacceptable conduct, and he goddamn knows it. This is also not a limitation of free speech. Nobody stopped you from bringing a bullhorn into that room, which I think should have raised some eyebrows. However, it should be ubiquitously understood that in order for heavy, serious discourse to occur, there must be a unanimous consent among all the participants in the discussion about who runs the meeting, who gets to talk, and when, and for how long. This isn't at all discriminatory against black people. It does discriminate against unruly behavior, rebellious members, and disruptive displays and protests. It baffles me that the two can even be mistaken for one another. You don't just only allow people who say what you like to have the floor, and people who say things you don't like get silenced. Over talking, especially with the use of an amplifier, is a blatant disregard for the rules regarding the governing the flow of discussion. It literally has nothing to do with race at all. Cameron Sexton has the final say over what behavior is kind of disruptive, and this has caused accusations of discriminating against blacks to be sent his way. This policy was called into question on the grounds that there is no way to reprimand him if his application of the rules crosses any lines, which is a valid concern. Where he went wrong is by tacitly accusing Sexton of violating constitutional rights based on a member's skin color and not treating everyone equally. For one, that didn't happen. Secondly, whilst his concern is valid, I would argue that his concern isn't truly about abuse of power, but his lack of power. The fact that people aren't going to sit around and open the floodgates for overt theatrical displays, all to promote social issues, is ridiculous. There is no evidence that the action against them or the new rules is intrinsically discriminatory. This is the narrative that the left clings to. a covert brand of demagoguery under the guise of social welfare. In summary, no state or House or Senate committees have considered any gun control legislation during their latest session, so all those allegedly powerful protests and unacceptable behavior ultimately have failed and boil down to a lack of respect for the system and its processes regarding how discourse is conducted. Even though Justin Peterson grew his hair into an afro and hijacked Martin Luther King Jr.'s cadence, all for attention and perceived efforts that haven't actually done anything besides piss people off and have rules created so shit like this doesn't comfortably become another day at the office. Holding someone accountable for being a nuisance is not discriminatory. That narrative has a film of dust thick enough to choke a hippopotamus. The people who are influenced by these trope fests are just setting progress back further and further every time we have to address situations that are preventable and shouldn't exist. The Tennessee Three is a guaranteed cringe, and I wish they didn't receive any kind of colloquial title for being minor bandits at best. One of the biggest debates causing a rift in American society today is gender affirming care. How far should it go? Who should be eligible for it? Is it actually health care? Almost half the country has enacted laws that prevent or restrict gender affirming care for minors. For LGBTQ plus seniors, it raises many questions about their quality of life in their later years. Whilst acceptance for transgender people and other members under the LGBTQ umbrella has grown significantly over the past decade, some of that progress is being undone. Some worry about facing discrimination or being denied health care, which they deem critical for their well being. When I hear the term gender affirming care, I tend to end up in a state of confusion. There's so much new and euphemistic language appearing out of nowhere designed to skew or spin the true meaning of things. It is difficult for me to be certain of how I feel about it, if I even care at all. What I do know about gender affirming care is that it includes procedures that involve mutilation and chemical treatments that are oftentimes irreversible and will significantly alter one's appearance, mentality, and overall quality of life. This is why many states are against the practice for minors. You're not allowed to get a tattoo until you're 18 because of the permanent nature of tattoos. You may get a tattoo which seemed cool as an adolescent, but once you're 30 seems like an awful decision. So-called gender affirming care, in my opinion, works the same way. Before I read this article, I say all this to highlight the things that have caused people to resent this LGBTQ wave and be less likely to be welcoming to them due to the urgency in which they have demanded so many exceptions and rules be carved out so they feel comfortable in their own skin. People tend to respond poorly to things when they have been bullied into them. This may have begun with a veil of love and kindness for all people, but that ship has long since set sail. I believe that they are humans and should be given a baseline level of respect and decency, regardless of the decisions that they have made for their lives. However, when people choose these paths for their lives, it is not obvious to me that they consider the lifelong battle that they have signed up for, given that the world they live in is shared with people who don't like their movement and aren't very sympathetic to it anymore. The article is from the Associated Press. Let's see here. It's giving me grief. 1 second. Ay, ay, ay. Can't do two things at once on this computer. Raji Narnasingh faced struggles throughout her life as a transgender woman, from workplace discrimination to the lasting effects of black market injections that scarred her face and caused chronic infections. In spite of the roadblocks, the 56-year-old Florida actress and activist has seen growing acceptance since she first came out decades ago. If you see older transgender people, it shows the younger community that it's possible I can have a life. I can live to an older age, she said. So I think that's a very important thing. Now, as a wave of new state laws enacted this year limit transgender people's rights, Narnan Singh has new uncertainty about her own future as she ages. Every now and then, I have this thought like, oh my God, if I end up in a nursing home, how are they going to treat me? Narnan Singh said. Most of the new state laws have focused attention on trans youth, with at least 22 states banning or restricting gender affirming care for minors. For many transgender seniors, it's brought new fears to their plans for retirement and old age. They already face gaps in health care and nursing home facilities properly trained to meet their needs. That's likely to be compounded by restrictions to transgender health care that have already blocked some adults' access to treatments in Florida, sparked the concerns that the law will expand to other states. Come on. Sorry. But the source that I'm getting this article from is wanting to load very slowly, so I gotta move at his pace, unfortunately. Just bad timing for this. Transgender adults say they're worried about finding welcoming spaces to live in their later years. I have friends that have retired and they've decided to move to retirement communities, and then little by little, they found that they're not welcome there, said Morgan Mayfair, a transgender man and the executive director of Trans Social, a Florida support and advocacy group. Discrimination can range from being denied housing to being misgendered and struggling to get nursing homes to acknowledge their visitation rights. In order to be welcomed there, they have to go into the closet and deny who they are, Mayfair said. About 171,000 of the more than 1.3 million transgender adults in the United States are aged 65 and older, according to numbers compiled by the Williams Institute at the UCLA School of Law. The growing population has brought more services such as nursing homes and assisted living centers that are geared towards serving the LGBTQ community, though such facilities remain uncommon. They include Stonewall Gardens, a 24 apartment assisted living center that opened in Palm Springs, California in 2015. The center staff are required to go through sensitivity training to help make the center a more welcoming environment for residents. Interim Director Kabakoff, Lauren Kabakoff Vincent said. The training is key for making a more accepting environment for transgender residents and making them feel more at home. Do you really want to be moving into a place where you have to explain yourself and go through it over and over? Vincent said. It's exhausting. And so I think being able to be in a comfortable environment is important. SAGE, which advocates on behalf of LGBTQ seniors, offers training to nursing homes and other elder care providers. The group trained more than 46,000 staff at 576 organizations around the country in the most recent fiscal year, but the group acknowledges that represents just a fraction of the elder care facilities around the country. We have a long way to go in terms of getting to the point where nursing homes, assisted living, and other long-term care providers are prepared for and ready to provide appropriate and welcoming care to trans elders. This gap concerns Tiffany Arriagas, Arieagus, 71, acclaimed drag performer in South Florida who also works in social services for SunServe, an LGBTQ nonprofit. I am just going on my 71 years on this earth and walking in the Civil Rights March with my mother at age 6 and then marching for gay rights. I've been blessed enough to see so many changes being made in the world, and then now I'm having to see this wonderful progress going backwards. A handful of states, including Massachusetts and California, have in recent years enacted laws to ensure that LGBTQ seniors have equal access to programs for aging populations and requiring training on how to serve that community. But the push for restrictions on access to health care has brought uncertainty in other states. Florida's ban on gender affirming care for minors also includes restrictions that make it difficult, if not impossible, for many adults to get treatment. I'm not sure how. That's confusing to me. Sage has seen a spike in the number of calls to his hotline following the wave of anti transgender laws, and Adams said about 40% of them have come from trans seniors, primarily in conservative parts of the country, worried about the new restrictions. The limits have prompted some trans adults to leave the state for care, with some turning to crowdfunding appeals for help. But for many trans seniors, such a move isn't easy. You have the general fear that is leading clinicians being concerned and perhaps stepping away from offering care, fear of trans elders of who is a safe clinician to go to. Florida's law has already created obstacles for Andrea Montanez, LGBTQ immigration organizer at Hope Community Center near Orlando. Montanez had said her prescription for said her prescription for hormone therapy, Jesus, was initially denied after the restrictions were signed. Montanez, who has been speaking out at the Florida Medical Board meetings about the impact of the new state law, says she's worried about what it will be mean. That confused me. What it will be mean as she approaches retirement. I hope I have a happy retirement, but healthcare is a big problem for Montanez, who was eventually able to get her prescription filled. And this just goes on and on to talk about another person. We don't want the community going back to that. They don't want it to regress and all of that. Now, not to downplay the struggles of transgender folks, but we all struggle in life. In fact, I think it's a necessary tenet to find a meaning and purpose in our lives, as I would suggest is a defining factor in most transgender people's lives as well. I've had extended conversations with dozens of trans people, and they've been remarkably accepting and kind to me, and I've done the same. I've had long conversations about life and the way they see things. And whilst I'm open minded and I do not judge them, I can't say that it's a path I would wish to walk down myself for many reasons. I'm a biological male, and I appreciate that about myself. Never would I want to be a woman if I'm using my life's experience as a man as my data. I think many of these individuals are so driven to become what they believe they are, even if that is contradictory to their physical readouts. They don't like it when people who align with objective reality refuse to bend too far from the way the world works and has always worked. On an elementary level, I don't think most people even care about gender hangups and are willing to provide the same human decency that they would give to anyone else. Somewhere along this path, the movement evolved to something radical and urgent that demanded a level of participation from people who are unfamiliar with the nuances of that lifestyle and who may support their quest to discover it themselves but don't wish to be a part of those decisions, like myself. The real world application of the doctrines of the gender ideologues, especially towards children, has proven to create confusion and resentment toward the group as a whole, not to mention the sudden plethora of people with pronoun mandates, colored hair, and their own standards of how one should behave for their own comfort and happiness. If you fail to adhere to them, you will be lambasted and labeled with derogatory titles. You could be canceled or lose your business or career. Now, the stakes are much higher, and it matters less that there may be some gentle and delightful members of this community because those aren't the ones you notice. They are simply living their lives and not pushing an agenda, but it's become tantamount to a religious cult, and the pretense in which it was introduced to us all is a distant memory. In conclusion, I do sympathize with the concerns of the elder members of the LGBTQ community regarding how the later years of their life will play out. The choices of the ones who have radicalized the movement have altered the general opinion of the group as a whole, and I believe it has pushed too far on people who may have been allies or had a neutral approach. This is something that you must consider and accept that can negatively affect you later in life, regardless of your individual attributes. When you join a group, you automatically sacrifice some of your individuality to be a member of that group and receive the group's benefits. Now, you may get the support you need from within the group. However, the group exists within a larger society who has been attacked and labeled so aggressively that they do not want anything to do with you. Nobody tells them that, and it sets them up to go through life bitter and upset because they don't fit in anywhere. Remember, you are the new kid on the block. And if you try to bully the old kids, even if you're successful, they will resent you for it and eventually take their ball and go play elsewhere because they're tired of you and your shit. Canadian psychologist and author Jordan Peterson has been forced to undergo social media training or risk losing his license as a result of posts he shared over the past few years that the Canadian governing body of psychologists isn't happy with. I find this utterly asinine. When I discovered Jordan Peterson, I was amazed with his eloquence, clarity, and depth of reasoning for almost everything he said. I see how some things he says can be viewed as controversial. However, he speaks what he believes to be true. He has data to back up just about everything he says, and his words and his books are highly acclaimed and have helped countless people around the world get their lives in order and do better for themselves. Despite this, many butthurt ass crybabies languished over his message being absorbed by young men. Many women interviewed him and tried to paint him as some kind of misogynist or far right extremist, and all of them were no match for his complex thinking and clarity in all of his explanations. I forget the chick's name, and frankly, I don't give a shit. But she tried to twist Peterson's words in an interview, colloquially dubbed, "So you're saying," and she repeatedly failed as Peterson stayed cool and composed and shot down every attempt at reframing his words and intent. Shot down every attempt at reframing his words and intent. I couldn't live with that. I had to fix it. Jordan Peterson has achieved worldwide stardom and travels around giving sold out lectures to his ever growing fan base. And I think he's a top 3 positive male icon that I would never hesitate to recommend to anyone struggling to find meaning and purpose in their lives. As far as this social media training bullshit is concerned, I don't have a clue as to what that is. And I've never heard of anyone else ever having to go through that shit as a reprimand for some kind of misbehavior. I don't think it's meant to do anything besides take Peterson for a ride, since he's beaten every rap that the leftist dweebs and weeping feminists have thrown his way. His experience and intelligence is unparalleled, and it saddens me to see this happen, but I understand that every great man is subject to adversity amongst triumph, and if anyone is capable of handling it, he's the guy, without any doubt. This article is courtesy of Fox News. In order for famous Canadian psychologist and author Dr. Jordan Peterson to undergo social media training for controversial posts he shared in the last few years was upheld by an Ontario court. Peterson, a popular media personality and professor emeritus of the University of Toronto Psychology Department, was forced to comply with the order Wednesday after 3 Ontario Divisional Court judges dismissed his legal complaint against the College of Psychologists of Ontario. The academic body had claimed earlier this year that several of Peterson's social media posts could be viewed as professional misconduct and that he'd take a social media training course. Peterson has generated controversy in recent years with several posts calling out transgender ideology, politicians, and other topics. Last year, the psychologist was suspended from Twitter, now X, for rebuking transgender actor Elliot Page. Whatever. Peterson posted, "Remember when pride was a sin? And Ellen Page just had her breasts removed by a criminal physician." Peterson was let back onto the platform following Elon Musk's takeover of the social media company. That same year, Peterson also trashed Sports Illustrated for featuring a plus-size model on its May cover, posting, "Sorry, not beautiful, and no amount of authoritarian tolerance is going to change that." For these posts and similar ones, the College of Psychologists ordered Peterson to undergo the training. It stated that if he refused, he could lose his psychology license in Ontario. Peterson responded on social media in January, "To clarify, it's been decided. I either submit to social media communication retraining or face a disciplinary hearing and possible suspension of my clinical license and the right to represent myself as a psychologist." Peterson then filed a judicial review of the College of Psychologists of Ontario's order, arguing that the body does not have control over his political commentary on social media. Come on. This computer is just, I'm not having a good day podcast wise, man. I swear. However, the Ontario court, which came to a unanimous decision among the 3 judges, dismissed Peterson's complaint, stating that the academic body's order falls under its responsibility to guard the profession of psychology in the public arena. Peterson maintained that his posts were, quote, off-duty opinions and not made in his capacity as a psychologist. However, one of the judges, Justice Paul Shabbos, wrote, "Dr. Peterson sees himself functioning as a clinical psychologist, quote, in the broad public space where he claims to be helping millions of people." The judge added, Peterson cannot have it both ways. He cannot speak as a member of a regulated profession without taking responsibility for the risk of harm that flows from him speaking in that trusted capacity. In an interview with Canadian outlet CBC News, Peterson struck a defiant tone over having to take the social media training. He declared, "I'll comply with their regulations, but I'm not going to do it in secret. And the reason I'm not going to do it in secret is because I don't believe I've done anything wrong." In a post on X from Wednesday, Peterson summed up the situation for his 4.6 million followers, stating, "So the Ontario Court of Appeal ruled that CP Ontario can pursue their prosecution. If you think that you have a right to free speech in Canada, you're delusional." He added, "I will make every aspect of this public, and we will see what happens when utter transparency is the rule. Bring it on. Okay, so I don't think it takes a telescope to notice that the governing bodies are on some complete bullshit here. They are strong arming this man's right to continue along with his decorated career because they disagree with him. And how the fuck is that ethical? He disagreed with Ellen Page's decision to remove her breast and posted on Instagram to the tune of 1.7 million likes. What's the issue? And I'm not calling her Elliot or he because, for one, she's not male. And for two, she's condoning an image that gender conversions are always gateways to happiness and well being, and I disagree with that. She's a celebrity. What the fuck was she so goddamn unhappy about? She doesn't even look like a man to me. She'll never be a man like I am. I vehemently disapprove of what she has done and how she boasted about it, like setting that example is something to be proud of. As a result, I have not even a baseline level of respect for Ellen Page or her decisions, and I find her to be a despicable pawn, desperate for attention, inundated with narcissistic glee, and I couldn't give a shit how anyone felt about it if it doesn't align with my conclusion. I share Peterson's contempt for such an act. I also remember when Peterson spoke on Sports Illustrated's decision to put a plus-size model on the cover for the first time. He stated something to the tune of Sports Illustrated holding the objective image of beauty to such a high regard and then capitulating to the emotional whims of those who didn't meet that standard. It wasn't meant to be an assault against them, but to uphold the reputation that the magazine had held for so long. His words were, "Sorry, not beautiful, and no amount of authoritarian tolerance is going to change that." So I guess he isn't allowed to have beauty standards if they don't align with Sports Illustrated standards. Fuck Sports Illustrated. If plus size women want to grace the cover of magazines, make your own goddamn magazines. These people want to tear down everything and replace it with themselves unrighteously, then turn around in the same breath and spew this diversity and inclusivity bullshit. Heavier women in this fat phobia movement seem to believe that they can shame men into liking them like they like thinner, leaner women. Wrong. The problem is always something other than them. Instead of them most likely engaging in a lifestyle that lends itself to obesity, they try to make it seem like men's inherent lesser desire for obesity is the problem, and it just fucking isn't. They will keep on with this nonsense until you have been beaten into submission by hordes of noisy losers who can't skillfully or with any actual effort get what they want. It's fucking annoying. Peterson appealed his decision to the courts, claiming these opinions were off duty and didn't represent his professional opinion as a clinical psychologist, but the courts didn't care. They claimed essentially that due to his scope in the broad public space, he can't have off-duty and on-duty opinions. He must be responsible for the risk of harm that flows from him speaking in that trusted capacity. What? Risk of harm? I forget. These fragile little snowflakes that shuffle about nowadays consider language, spoken words, as acts of violence, which is just fucking stupid. He hasn't actually harmed anyone. Just the fragile egos of some salty ass nitwits angry that he's an actual force for good in the world. To which I say, fuck them. Let them stew in their own hatred. Lastly, Peterson is right about free speech in Canada. It's a leftist hellhole where assisted suicide is legal and Jordan Peterson is considered threatening. No, it makes no sense whatsoever, and it's a tyrannical extension of a government that's gotten too damn big for his britches. Free speech is not free, especially if it's true. People's fantasies have been catered to far too heavily, and now the fabric of reality is questioned too often. Anyone brave and daring enough to speak out against it will be attacked. I hope he does reveal every sinister detail of this alleged social media training. And I hope those bastards in the Canadian brass expose themselves for the fascist fucks they are. Hey, everybody, that's the show. Thanks for listening. This concludes season 2. Season 3 will start Monday. Taking a break off of mental maintenance as a result of the end of the season being today. So part 4 of 9 will come out next Saturday or next Sunday. And I'm sorry I missed Wednesday. I had to take a day for me. I didn't intend to fall behind, and then I come back and I'm having all kind of issues with my laptop, recording software, cameras, and whatnot. And I was just kind of overwhelmed, and I was very, very physically tired. So I had to take a day to myself, but this is not going to change. Season 3 starts on Monday. I'm going to be working on either midway through season 3 or definitely by season 4, getting this podcast to a video show and not just an audio show. That is definitely in the works. So we're looking forward to that. Other than that, I don't think I have anything else for you guys. I love you all. I appreciate you for listening. Until next time, I'll holla at you. Have a great weekend.